Technology has changed education. More and more schools now have students with one-to-one devices, which changed how teachers teach. Students have access to digital learning tools, including ways to obtain information and knowledge, and different means for assessments to identify mastery, growth, and learning gaps. Technology in education has also changed the way students engage in learning. A learning management system allows teachers and students to access all the digital learning tools in one location. LMSs are more commonly used in higher education to accommodate adult learners' diverse schedules. LMSs can be used both synchronously and asynchronously as needed. In 2020, the spring pandemic forced all schools to go to distance learning, including elementary schools. Many elementary administrators saw the need to implement LMSs to continue the learning process. LMSs can be overwhelming for teachers to learn and change how they teach, especially at the elementary level. Most research studies on the implementation of LMSs have been in higher education. Very few studies of the implementation of LMSs have been conducted at the high school and elementary levels. The purpose of this mixed method study is to understand the factors that affect teacher acceptance of a learning management system in a K-8 elementary school. Research questions include: what factors affect teacher acceptance of a learning management system in a K-8 elementary school? How do external factors and internal factors affect LMS acceptance? What are other factors not considered that might affect LMS acceptance? Samples will include elementary school teachers in Orange County required to use a learning management system. In this mixed method study, 3 qualitative instruments will be used and will include purposeful sampling of participants. The first instrument will be focus groups. At this time, focus groups will be conducted via Zoom and recorded, combining 3 to 4 participants from 3 Catholic elementary schools in the Diocese of Orange. Participants will be informed ahead of time that the session will be recorded for the research study. The second instrument will be the interviews. Interviews will take place in person and will be one-on-one. The researcher is looking to interview 1 to 2 participants from each of the 3 schools at the school setting. Interviews will be videotaped to look at body language, tone of voice, disposition, and words used to transcribe categories. The third instrument will be documentation. Documentation will include footage of LMS usage shared by participants, screenshots of teachers' LMSs, and field notes from the observations. While collecting data, the researcher will pay attention to ethical considerations by obtaining consent from all participants and protecting the privacy of all participants. Prior to the focus group and interviews, participants will be informed that they are participating in a study about factors and supports needed to build teacher efficacy in using LMSs at an elementary school level. In addition, prior to beginning data collection, the researcher will obtain the permission of the Institutional Review Board, which will provide evidence that the study design follows their guidelines for conducting ethical research. As part of the case study, the researcher will select 3 elementary school sites that have implemented an LMS within the Diocese of Orange. Purposeful sampling will include snowball sampling, starting with suggestions from the principal at each site, followed by participant suggestions. Combination sampling will also be used to allow for flexibility. Data will be collected through one-on-one interviews in the same room, group interviews via Zoom, and a collection of artifacts that include screenshots of participants' LMSs. All interviews will be video recorded. The researcher will follow the procedures for preparing and conducting interviews suggested by Creswell and Poth 2018 in Figure 7.4. To strengthen the validity of the research study, the researcher will member check by asking for clarification as well as paraphrasing. In addition, the researcher will acknowledge areas of research bias and be aware of situations that might create participant reflexivity. the researcher will be cognizant of the importance of neutrality and participant comfortability. After organizing the data and transcribing audio and video collections, the researcher will read transcripts in their entirety before creating codes. The researcher will read transcripts multiple times, taking notes using memos. The researcher will use a hybrid process for coding, starting with deductive coding. The researcher will create initial codes based on the research questions, highlight themes in the transcripts, and then record them in a theme by data matrix similar to Maxwell 2013 Figure 5.1. The researcher will reread the transcripts, highlighting categories and adding new codes. Codes will consist of anything that stands out, fits with the initial themes, and patterns that arise. The researcher will use descriptive coding methods and in vivo coding methods. Codes will be collated with excerpts from the transcripts. The researcher will keep track of codes in a codebook, most likely using Google Sheets. The researcher will organize codes into themes and look for patterns and relationships with supporting data. Finally, the researcher will look for connections and make interpretations based on patterns, themes, and categories. Change and new ways of doing things are not easy and not always well received or accepted. The pandemic forced a different learning environment across all grade levels: preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school, and even higher education. The shift in learning was unexpected. Teachers, specifically at the elementary school level, had to adapt to new modalities to continue the learning process. LMSs support multifaceted ways of learning through synchronous and asynchronous instruction, differentiated means to submit assignments, and forms of timely and structured feedback. Through this research study, the researcher hopes to discover two things: what inhibits or prevents elementary school teachers' utilization of an LMS. This discovery will help provide the necessary support to move forward in understanding concerns, needs, time, and supports needed to build teacher efficacy. And two, in looking forward, how have elementary school teachers used an LMS in innovative ways to enhance in-person learning in a blended classroom?